Hi, and welcome tonight to the extension of the Ask It series right now. I'm Joey. This is Pastor Doug Dahmer with me
Hi.
tonight. And Doug, just to start off, just tell me a little bit, how was it in the last 4 weeks doing the Ask It series with all the questions that have been flowing in?
It was interesting. We had close to 100 questions, and we were able to answer, 35 or 40, something like
Quite a
that,
bit.
over the 4 weeks. And just did it in a game show kind of format. It was Jeopardy, and people in the audience could ask any question they wanted. And each week there was about 30 questions up there, so I had to kind of have 30 sermons prepared, which was kind of crazy. But I was really amazed at the level of depth that people had for their questions. It was cool to see all the things that people have questions about, and it was neat to see how they were not just kind of questions about the Bible. Sometimes they're just, how do you apply the Bible in this situation or that situation of our life? I was really impressed.
Now, what was the most interesting or odd question you got out of the whole series?
By far, what was the DNA of Jesus? I thought that was a really goofy question, and then when I started studying it, it was probably the most profound question that I got. I talked about it last Sunday. If you didn't see that, you can go to last week's online service and you can watch it. It was really cool. All the background and depth of what was the DNA of Jesus.
Mhm. And we want to remind you too, if you missed any of the weeks of the Ask It series, you can go to salemforyou.com/askit, and they're all going to be there. And you can find out even which question you might have wanted to hear. They're labeled, and then you can find it right in the video.
Hopefully, you'll also find some additional materials that I've been able to glean from uh, books or resources that I read that I think had some great insights into it. And I think, Joey, you've even added something now to the notes of this, right?
Yeah, so for tonight, we're going to cover three more of the questions that there were just so many you didn't have a chance to cover in the series. And so we're going to look at three of those tonight. There are some resources that are going to be in the notes tab that if you're looking at the chat box, it's right underneath that and it's the right tab and it says notes on it. In there, you're going to find a few different things. One's going to be a book by Bill Hybels called Simplify. There's going to be another one in there about how words have changed over the years. And there's also going to be an article from Focus on the Family. So good resources in there.
Speaking of words that change, why don't you get to the one on apologetics? Because I think you know it better than I do.
Yeah. So that's one of the questions that I think we had put it in the Jeopardy board, but it never had a chance to come up during the series. And so someone had asked the question during the series, why do we use the word apologetics? Because to what that
Because
sounds
we're really
like,
sorry.
yes, we're sorry about our faith. And you know, at initial, it kind of sounds like that. You know, when we say we need to have an apology for something, it's like when you're growing up, your mom says to you, go apologize to that kid, you just took their toy away. Well, you go say you're sorry for it. And so it's like, why do we call our faith apologetics? What does that mean? Well, looking at the word, I found this interesting in the research. And apologetics can have two meanings. One is the meaning where you're sorry for something, but the other one is a defense for your belief, your stance, where you're at. Originally, the word apologetic actually comes from a Greek word, which is apologia. I may have been close to that one. I'm not up on my
I thought
Greek.
it was apologia, but you're great. Yeah.
I'm not up on my Greek, but something like that. Yeah. And what that originally meant was a defense. And so under the notes tab, one of the articles is one from a TED Talk that talks about how some words have changed over the years. So for instance, the word awful. When we think of the word awful today, it's disgusting. I'm not going to say you had an awful series in that way.
Oh yeah, sure.
But in the other,
no.
but if we use awful in the original tense, the way that word originally came, it meant full of awe. So your series was awful.
Wow, stop sucking up. Yeah, I'm thinking of words like that's really cool.
Mhm.
It has a totally different meaning than like just the temperature outside or that's really hot. The words have taken on so many different iterations now that you have to kind of go back to the original meaning of a lot of these words to figure that out. And apologetics is one of those. It just means the defense of the faith or the defense of a certain point of the Bible. And usually it should be able to be defended, not just simply by, well, this is what I think. It should be able to be defended by clarity of doctrine in the Bible. So it's not just one passage that's picked out, but what does the whole of Scripture say about that one topic? And then it also should have, because we are Christians and we believe wholeheartedly in the historicity of Scripture, we also should be able to defend it historically, geographically, and scientifically. And that's the great thing about the Bible, is it stands up to all those tests. So we can be bold in our apologetics of Scripture and never have to feel like we have to back down.
Absolutely. There's that one called the Apology of the Augsburg Confession.
Yes.
Actually, that confused me at first. I was like, are we apologizing for our faith in
Yeah,
there? Are we
yeah.
sorry about what happened?
Yeah.
But understanding what the word can mean in the defense of it,
Right.
it really helps clarify a lot of things.
Yes.
So I hope if you've submitted that question, I hope that we did a decent job of answering that one. If not, let us know in the chat, and we'll do a better job at it. Doug, how about a question for this one? Who's going to win the Super Bowl this weekend?
Cowboys, without a doubt. Cowboys have got it.
Doug, the Cowboys aren't playing this weekend.
Well, they're not playing here in America, but where they always play in heaven anyhow, they always win the divine game because they're God's team. We all know that.
You know, this I saw on Facebook this week. There was a church, I don't even know where it was at, but they put on their sign this week, how many times is the word eagle and patriot in the Bible? Well, it was Eagles 33 and the Patriots nothing. Is what
Really?
I saw.
Wow. So I guess there's the score.
So I don't know if that means anything for this weekend. None of you submitted that question, but it may have been something that was on someone's mind.
Yes.
So we figured.
Probably wasn't, but that's okay. We made it up.
Yeah. Another question that got submitted that was interesting to look at this week was this question right here. Why do good friends have to move far away?
Lack of deodorant?
Or yeah, personal hygiene.
No toothpaste. Yeah.
It could be that. That could be one reason. And you know, I think we've all had that in life where we've had a good friend move away, and
That's hard. And you know, the place that I hope is somewhat of a resource is Bill Hybels wrote a book called Simplify. And in that he talks about a lot of different ways simplifying your life externally, internally.
And in one of the chapters of the book, he talks about this idea of deepening relationships. In that chapter, he describes 3 types of relationships. If you want to read more of this book, you can find that in the notes tab. It links you to Amazon. You can purchase it there and find a way to read it. But the 3 types of friendships he talks about are circumstantial friends, real friends, true friends for a season, and also he talks about friends for a lifetime. I want to start first with the circumstantial friends. Now, to clarify, these are not fake friends. It's not like they're made up friends that are circumstantial, that it's like, you know, I'll hang out with you, but I really don't
Like a
care
lot of
about
the friends you talk about that really don't even exist.
you. Yes, kind of in my life there, I
Yes.
guess.
Your imaginary friends.
Sometimes I have to make sure rent a friend program.
Yes.
But that's not what we're talking about here. Is a circumstantial friend is a friend that maybe it's your favorite grocery clerk that you run into, maybe a checkout line, you see the same person, or you go to Starbucks, you see the same barista.
So they're not like really close friends. I don't really know your name or your family or any of that kind of stuff.
Well, you could actually know their name. You could know their name, but probably outside of this circumstance, say outside of Starbucks,
Yeah.
outside of the gym, stuff like that, you're probably not going to hang out with them. And for instance, whenever one of you goes elsewhere, say you've moved from Starbucks to McDonald's for your coffee, I don't know. But if you do, you're probably not going to go chase down that friend that you had got to know a little bit, and not that it was a fake friendship, but it's based on the circumstance you're in. So that's the first type of friend. The second one he talks about is true friends for a season. Now, in the book, Bill Hybels talks about a friend that he had known for a very long time, about 20 years since starting the church.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, his friend had sold his company that he did and said, "We're moving to Florida." And he said, "Go Bears," because they're in Chicago. And
Go Beers?
yeah,
Bears.
that's always a word I've struggled with. It's like apology.
I know,
apologetic
I
word.
know.
But that was good though. and so he's like, "Man, I thought this was a real friendship right here," and it was a real friendship, and it still could be a real friendship, but it was for a season. And I think that happens in all our lives. I can think of friends that I grew up with in grade school, high school, college, that they were great friends for that time, but now
A little contact with them, but not a deep amount of contact.
Yeah.
And it was more for this season. And it was a thankful season that God had blessed me with.
but it was in that season of lifetime. The third one that he describes is lifelong friends. These are gifts from God when you get a friend for a lifetime. Because a friend for a lifetime is one that you're going to go through ups and downs with. It's the friend that you can call any time of the day, any time of the night. This is a friend that's always going to be there for you. It's a friend that's toughed it out with you.
And these aren't made overnight. These are not forced friendships by any means.
They're friendships that develop, and they develop over time, and it has to do with carrying each other's burdens at times and also celebrating in each other's victories. I think you had mentioned someone from the Bible like that, a lifelong friend.
Paul and Timothy had what Paul calls kindred spirit. That means it's not just that they know about what each other are going through, it's they actually have experienced what they're going through. And their bond is significantly deeper. They can almost read each other's minds at times and finish each other's sentences because they've gone through so many life experiences. What I found is really interesting is there's a lot of research that's been done on this last category of lifelong friends. And almost all the research says the same thing, that if you can have one friend like that, you are richer than most. That most people, when asked, cannot name one lifelong friend. And it just contributes to this sense of loneliness because we fill our life so much with this front end of circumstantial friends. We think we know people because we run into them or have some casual contact, or even we think we have friends because when we used to work there, or we used to hang out there, we had these friends. But then when you're just kind of looking at your life and who have you shared life with over the last 10 or 15 years, you're like, really nobody. And the friend I had was the guy I played golf with, or the friend I had is the guy I worked with. But when golf went away or when work went away, you really didn't have a friend. So where do I fall in that category? I don't want to be the.
Oh, you're gonna put me on the spot right now. Doug, I don't think I've called you at 2 in the morning yet.
That's right. That's
Maybe tonight. I'll
yes.
call you at 2 in the morning and we're gonna test this friendship right then.
right. A lot of people call those kind of friends 2 a.m. friends, which means that you can call this person at 2 a.m. and they will not think a thing about it. Like it's 2 o'clock in the morning and I really need somebody to talk to, and they'll sit there and they'll talk to you. Or can you come over? I need just somebody to sit with me. They'll do that. Rarely do people have too many 2 a.m. friends, and consider yourself rich if you have one of those people in your life.
Good question here from Bappa and Gigi. They write, can a family member be a lifelong friend?
And I would think there is a family member that is going to be with you through ups and downs. Putting it in the category of a lifelong friend, I would definitely say have very much qualities of a lifelong friend. Would you say there's a difference between family and a friend, or can they? It's a good question. It's a very good question.
It's a great question because so many times families just by geography and by lifestyle and priorities have become so disconnected, and not a lot of families today, you would say, even hang together. There's not a lot of family reunions, all that kind of stuff. A lot of that's gone away. And so what's interesting is when you do talk to people who are still in connection with their family and they get together and they like sharing time, that really is a family member that has turned to a friendship in adulthood. And that's incredible. If you got those people in your life, you're really blessed, because most families, especially after the death of the second parent, most family systems disintegrate. They'll stay together after the death of the first parent, but when the second parent dies, rarely will most children stay connected. And it's because they're being held together by a family system rather than by friendship. So I'm happy for you when your family turns into your friends.
That was a very great question and very good insight on that. I like that idea of where you see when you can last for a lifetime. That's amazing. It makes me think of that movie, one of my favorite Christmas movies, It's a Wonderful Life, and that last quote in the book that Clarence writes in the book is "No man is poor who has friends," and
Right.
and the
Yeah.
whole idea is I'm saying Jimmy Stewart, but that's the actor. That
Right.
what's his? I can't think of his character name
Mr.
right now.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's what we'll call Mr. Wonderful right now. But he's going through all this, and in the end,
It's the friends that really matter,
Right.
And the lifelong friends, lifelong family members.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm glad that I hope that if this is a friend, why do friends have to move away? It is sad when they move away.
Well, maybe a question behind this also, it's a question we got a lot of questions on, and it never got selected during the sermon series. And it was this underlying question of, why am I so lonely? Why do I feel so alone? And I think there's two reasons for that. One of those is because there is an enemy right now to friendship and relationship, and it's social media. Because I can live under this illusion that I have a lot of friends because I have 1,500 Facebook friends. And I really think that those are my friends, when in fact, I don't really know anything about them. I don't really know a whole lot about their life. I don't ever talk with them. I just see that they sort of troll and follow me, but I don't really connect with that many people. And what's happening is these people, I have 1,500 friends, but when my birthday came around, only 60 of them wished me happy birthday. And so I actually feel depressed because not all 1,500 even wished me happy birthday. And even to wish you happy birthday on Facebook, you've been prompted by them anyhow. So it's just a real weird kind of fake friendship. And teenagers are highly susceptible to this because their brain actually reacts to a click. So as soon as they hear a click or they hear a ding on their phone, their brain actually begins to submit a certain kind of chemical that feels like a high. And what happens is they become so dependent on that, just like someone who's addicted to alcohol or whatever, that they start setting themselves up to always have dings and clicks on their phone. So it's called like depression. And if I'm not getting the likes I want, people are not liking my statement or my picture or whatever, they become more and more depressed. And so it's creating this sense of loneliness, like nobody cares about me, nobody's out there. But what we don't think is how inundated we are today in social media with interaction, but those interactions are not deep. And so we could, at the end of the day, take our phone to bed, but feel very, very lonely because we really have nobody who's connected deeply enough into our life. And also, one of my favorite verses in the Bible is John 10:10. The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. I really believe that Satan wants us to feel alone. He works hard at destroying relationships. He works hard at destroying marriages and families and friendships because he likes people to be alone and separated from each other, because when they're separated, they're more easily tempted. But when they live together in community, Satan knows they're stronger. And so realize that loneliness in its own sense is a sense of spiritual warfare. And you need to come at it with the power of the gospel and realize that I do have friends. I am loved. I'm not only loved by my Heavenly Father, but I'm loved by the people who are around me. Even at times when I feel lonely, that's sometimes a sensation or feeling that Satan's giving me that's not based in reality at all.
and that relates, especially the Facebook part you're talking about. Bill Hybels talks also in a simplified book about these circles of friends, and you have that wide outer circle,
Yeah.
friends that really don't know you very much to the core, but maybe just know your name, stuff like that. But it is a very special, like you mentioned, even having one lifelong friend, that one in the inner core, is rich to have that. It's
Right.
like, it's amazing.
It's always weird. I find this very much a reality in my life because on a weekend I can preach to 1,000 people and I'm on a stage and everybody sees me, 20 feet tall. And I'm telling you sometimes the most intimate details of my marriage with Dilo or my own life, my struggles. And so you're watching me and you're kind of thinking you're getting to know me. And yet I'm on a stage and sometimes I can't even see you sitting out there because of the lights. And then I'll be walking down the aisle at Walmart and you'll come up like you're my best bud. And I really don't know who you are because I didn't see you in church Sunday. And I don't know anything about your life and you know everything about my life. And that's just called pastoral jilting. When a pastor looks at you and can't remember your name, well, he's trying to remember 1,000 people's names. and you're just remembering that one person's name. And so that's that kind of odd dynamic when you have these very wide circle of friends where a lot of people know you, probably better than most people, and you really don't know a whole lot about them.
So I hope that answered the question that you asked about just why do they have to move away. That I hope that maybe they're a friend that you're still going to stay in contact with.
But also because of social media, distance doesn't have to end a friendship. You can use social media in a good way. You can continue to Skype with that person, Facebook chat with that person. There's a way that you can continue to have a real relationship with people today that move away that you couldn't have done 20 years ago. And now you can stay very involved in their life and in their family just through modern means of technology.
Absolutely. So we see the goods and the bads that social media can bring about.
I watch a lot of grandparents who stay up with their grandchildren through Skype, and they're watching, the baby first walk. They're hearing the first words. They're actually there in the living room with their baby, even though maybe they're 1,000 miles away. So there are some really good things that happen with media.
Absolutely. So Doug, this last question that we have for tonight, we've got plenty more questions in the next 4 weeks that are going to come too. So we're just going to look at one more tonight. And this is a big one right here. This is one that I think many people ask. It is, why does God want us to save sex for marriage?
That's a good question. Why does God want to save sex for marriage? Do we do it just for values, for morals? What's the big deal about it? Why? Some people would argue that if you try before you practice, you kind of find out what you want. That's some people's argument to it. If we go back to Genesis, just Genesis chapter 2, you have the verse that talks about when man and woman come together, you see this oneness. And what this talks about is it's not just a oneness physically, but you're also talking about a oneness spiritually or emotionally. And so there's a connectedness that's beyond what a physical connectedness is. What we've done is we've posted an article in the notes tab. I think that take the time to read this. It's actually by Focus on the Family, and it's a composition of 10 different articles about why wait for sex. I think that's actually the title. It is, yes, Why Wait for Sex is the title. And phenomenal study. Actually, there was some research done in it. A study of over 100,000 women engaged in premarital sex were linked with higher dissatisfaction in the present marriage, unhappiness with the level of sexual intimacy, and the prevalence of low self-esteem. That's just one statistic that comes from it. But what we also see is, why does God save sex for marriage? He saves it for that special union. We see so many things that can happen outside of that, whether that be an unexpected pregnancy, whether we see that as some sexually transmitted disease. And I know when you talked about in the Ask It series, when you were asked about what is our stance on the LGBTQ community, you talked about how ever since sin has entered the world, it really has just distorted our view on the sexual intimacy that God created it to be.
I think I would agree with you 100%. If you go back to Genesis, it talked about this completely monogamous relationship between a man and a woman. That was God's original intent. And then if you read towards the end of the Bible where Paul is talking about the misuse of sexuality, he talks about there is not a more powerful stronghold in a person's life than in the area of sexuality, because every other sin happens on the outside of us, but sexuality happens on the inside of us. In the 37 years I've worked here as a counselor and pastor, I've dealt with everything from premarital sex to extramarital sex to bisexuality, homosexuality, transsexual gender identity. And you do just begin to see that there was this original intent that God had. One man, one woman, in a complete union where sex was not something that was compared to another partner. It was shared mutually, and their souls were knit together. And ever since then, it's like Satan realizes he can get a foothold and to distort or destroy people's hearts and lives through sort of the misuse of sex. And I believe that's why there's so much just sort of sexual confusion these days of couples who have been unfaithful with each other over and over again. And one person having affairs, so the other person goes out and has an affair to try to even the score, and now both of them are terribly broken because of that. I remember listening to a message a long time ago by the guy named John Ortberg, and he was saying that one of the things people don't understand is that every time you have sex, you leave a little piece of yourself in that other person. And he was talking with women specifically that he had counseled over the years. And he met with this one woman, and she said that she had probably had somewhere between 75 and 100 premarital relationships. And she couldn't figure out why she could feel no intimacy with her husband. And he just said, because you left a little piece of yourself on every headboard. And by the time you got married, there was nothing left of you. I think sometimes we don't see the fact that our sexuality is actually tied to our heart and to our soul. And so we see it as something, especially in our culture today. Our culture is not unusual. There have been in the history of humankind, there have been seasons or generations or centuries of just sort of sex-craved cultures. There was in the Old Testament around the time of Babylon. There was in the New Testament from about the 1st to the 3rd century through the Greek culture. There was just this sort of sex saturated culture, and everything was seen as being very sexual. Then you move past that, and by the 14, 15, 1600s, things have become much less sex saturated, and then it kind of swung over to the puritanical times where it was almost wrong or naughty to even think of it. We've now moved back again, and you see a much more sex-craved culture where everything has sexual innuendo and everything has some kind of like a sexual fantasy attached to it. And what we don't realize is what's happening are people's souls are just being shriveled by it. I still believe today the number one assault of sexuality is pornography. And what's weird is I deal with 5th and 6th and 7th grade kids who are already feeling the addiction of pornography they can't move away from. And so by the time they even enter into their first relationship, they already have such a warped understanding of what human sexuality looks like because they've seen it through the eyes of actors who've been putting it on for pay and thinking that's what sexuality really looks like. But then you also have that imagery that's building up by the time they actually enter into a relationship. The only way they can think of it is sexual, not relational.
It's wow. That's sad to hear. It even starts that young of an age now, and with technology the way it is, as we talked about with social media, it can have such a good side to it, but at the other side of it, it can have such a negative part of it too. And I guess the biggest thing I know that we'd want them to take away from this is tonight, even if something's happened where sexuality has been distorted before, and maybe you felt like because you messed up once, you can never be forgiven. That is absolutely about, if the sexually impure don't make it into heaven, but also the greedy don't make it in.
The liars.
I mean,
Yes.
when you round it all out,
First
none of
Corinthians
us,
6 if you're looking for it. It's
none of us
unbelievable. Yes.
get into heaven
Yeah.
on our own. And that's the big thing.
Yeah.
It all comes back. It's because of the grace of God that we're even right with Him.
What I've learned also in counseling is that whatever your struggle, Satan is going to make you feel like your struggle is the absolute worst. And I find people walking into my office sometimes just broken because of their sin struggle. And when they tell me what it is, I'm like, really, that's it? Because it's so minimal compared to some of the things I've heard. But for them, it's like the worst thing because Satan likes to bring judgment and condemnation and shame to whatever our struggle is. So we've got to remember that no matter what our struggle, God sees us as forgiven and restored. And when you feel those feelings of just judgment and condemnation about what you've done, that's never God. That's Satan. God always gives us conviction moving forward. He never gives us this judgment about what we've done. That's always going to be Satan. And so that's why Paul says in Romans 8, there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus.
Absolutely, yeah. Satan, as Jesus says, is the father of lies. Right. That's his character. He's a liar.
Well, in James it says too, every good and perfect gift comes down from the Father of lights. So everything God gives is perfect and good. But what Satan does in every case is he tries to distort, to distract, to use it to actually hurt us. And so you can look at almost anything that is in existence today. And originally it was created for good, but over time Satan has taken it and twisted it and turned it for bad.
Absolutely. So I hope that gives you a good answer right there of why does God ask us, why does God say save sex for marriage? And because he knows how fulfilling it can be in that type of relationship. And God never wants to be the bad guy in anything.
God is not anti-sex. This is what I love to tell teenagers. Who do you think gave you the plumbing? I mean, he's the one that created the plumbing to where it works the way it works.
Mhm.
He gave you all the desires for it. He gave you all the attraction. So all of that comes from God, but he also knows the power of it. And so, like you would take anything that has power and put limitations on it, he realizes that our sexuality is so powerful that it would be like you handing a 12-year-old a gun and saying, figure it out. We don't do that. We know it's power, and so we are very careful with it, and we put restrictions around it. God does that same thing with us, with the most powerful gift he's given us, and that's our sexuality.
Absolutely. Well, Doug, that's what we got for tonight for questions. I hope, has tonight been as excruciating as the last 4 weeks have
No,
been?
I appreciate your deep wisdom and insight. It helped a lot.
Well, this has
So we're
been,
gonna do this again next week?
yeah, if
Cool.
that's,
That's
if
awesome.
that works for you,
Yeah.
I'd love to do that next
Please continue
weekend.
to ask questions if you have them. We just try to keep going as we've got the questions, and hopefully we can give some insights, both just biblically and then just what we deal with in the context of ministry.
Yeah, and again, if you want to see some of the resources that we used for tonight, they're in the notes tab right under the chat, and you'll see one for each. And otherwise, you're also welcome to email us here anytime if you want to know. It's like, where did Doug pull that one from?
Yeah.
I don't know where that's from. Or, man, Joey really brought that one out of nowhere. I don't know where that source is. Let us know, because we'd love to get them to you.
Good. Thanks.
I guess we'll end it for tonight, and we'll see you back here next week.
Bye-bye.